Okay, hello, happy Thursday, I think. Oh, my light is off. Hold on. This probably won't make any difference to anybody out there. There we go. All right, got my glasses here. So I thought this was a. Let me start over. Let me start over. Uh, Krista, a friend of the channel, posed a question to me, or didn't, not actually as a question, but sent me this and said, "Hey, this would be a good topic: immersion in role playing games, or how to get better at it, how to get it." And I thought, oh my gosh, what a huge, huge question. I think you could probably have a whole YouTube channel that is based only on uh, thinking about this topic. So, of course, why the heck am I now, just a day later after having said, like, oh my gosh, how crazy am I to then be talking about it? But I was thinking about it a lot. And though I don't think that at the end of the stream we'll have it all figured out, I think it's worth talking about because it immersion's been one of those phrases I think that gets bandied about a lot. And I'm always interested in it when I see it in terms of what people are looking for, what people really think they're getting. I kind of think it has a little bit of that sort of buzz term. Hey, Gashrin. Buzz term, not unlike player agency or verisimilitude, and these other phrases that are thrown out there into the conversation, in the mix, that maybe aren't as much understood collectively. I don't want to say that people are just throwing out words and they don't know what they mean, but maybe we have different ideas of what we're looking for. Maybe what some people would call immersion, I might call something else, and what I might call immersion, somebody might call something else. We don't ever usually get to the point in those conversations when we just talk about it, trying to figure out, well, what is it exactly that we're going for, and then go from there. So I thought the first thing, and I just jotted down a few notes here in one of my whiteboards. And this whiteboards, if you're watching this on video, I'd use an app called, basically, I think it's Weegie.io, WEJE.io, for all these whiteboards that I put all my fancy pants stuff onto. I just put the question up, what is immersion? And then I just think the things that come to my mind when I think of immersion are basically all internal, I guess would be the best way to put it. For me, that's being focused in the moment, in the game. Where whatever situation we're in, I kind of feel like I'm in this kind of zone when that's what I'm looking at. I'm present. This is what I'm thinking about. It's I'm both focused on the thing, and I'm also kind of feel like I'm here. I'm part of it. The other people in the room, we're all kind of in this sort of bubble, and that this is the one that's maybe the most. I would often think about flow. This idea when you're kind of on a roll where things just seem to come and there's very little friction in moving. And I don't necessarily mean in progress in a story way, but just in terms of all the communications, everything going back and forth. Everyone just seems to be on the same wavelength, the same flow. There's very few interruptions that aren't part of this moment that we're in. We're not going off to answer our phones. We're not looking off to the side. We're not just bounced out to other questions. We all seem to be kind of just have the game, and sort of this being this kind of envelope of the game that we're all sharing in this particular moment. So those are the things I think of when I think of immersion. Ryan says, yeah, to me, immersion is basically a state of flow. And Ovaltine Patrol says it's definitely a bit of a tongue-in-cheek meme when it comes to the modding scene for video games like Fallout and Elder Scrolls. Yes, I think, and part of that's part of the confusion, I think, is that we think of different media forms, immersion takes on different forms. So what is immersive in a video game? And I actually think this is a big problem, and I guess I'll just jump ahead. Thanks, Ovaltine Patrol, because I think when I see the term bandied about online, it tends to be in relation to the tools we use. So I will see people say, and I think I once saw this from a player, and they were like they were posting a looking for game, player looking for a game, and they had all these requirements for their tools. And for them, it was, well, for me, I need to have an immersive. For me to have an immersive experience, I need volumetric lighting, and I need fog of war, and I need the Roll20. I need three-dimensional maps and all this kinds of nice stuff. And that to me was immersion. And maybe, and I don't want to speak ill, maybe this person's sense of immersion is that. My sense of immersion has nothing to do with those things. I think there are things that can be additive to the experience. Maybe I would say what we should do is I think, and I was thinking about this earlier, separate immersion from spectacle. So I think a lot of the things that we look at in the audio visual realm, are spectacle. And while they can add to things, I don't think any of those are necessary for immersion. And I would also say that as an exercise, see what happens if you take away some of those things. Because I think ultimately, as at least back in the day, and I think that's maybe I don't want to go on all kinds of tangents, but I think one of the things that's been lost for a lot of folks with the way everyone's spread out and scheduling and then COVID and things is not really being able to just have a lot of experiences playing in at someone's table, at someone's house, just a bunch of you. Certainly back in the day when we just didn't have stuff. I mean, even when some of the technology existed, I don't know many places where we were projecting stuff and on the surfaces and doing all kinds of stuff. Maybe I was never lucky enough to play at a table that had lots of minis. We were just playing on desks at a coffee table or with a couch and some chairs around it. Some people played at a cabin, some people played in a car. And I think that you can achieve immersion in all these situations. And I think that something's been lost a little bit with folks who have only played in these really highly spectacle driven versions of the game that you get to a point where maybe you feel like this is what I have to have. I need to have all these things to get fully immersed. And I almost think that maybe you should unplug a little bit. Not that I mind those tools or anything like that or the spectacle, but I don't think these things are as necessary to achieving immersion as we want, at least in terms of what I am calling immersion. For this person or these people who feel that way, maybe they feel like immersion has to do with other things. We got some, so chat already blowing up. Elfbase says immersion is also highly subjective. Yes, it is, which is why I wanted to define it up front, right? This is why I wanted to define it. And you can take my definition and say, oh, yeah, that sounds like me, or no, I need other things. Because, yes, it absolutely is, which is why I think, yet again, with a lot of these terms, we hear them online and someone's using it in their subjective definition, and we don't get to see what that definition is. We just see the word, right? Immersion for me. So yeah, there's a lot. This is part of what makes it such a complicated, huge topic. Daniel Everett says, so they're torn on this subject. Immersion in a D&D game is on everyone at the table, players and DMs, but as a teacher and a DM, I feel like it's my responsibility keeping the game moving and interesting. And then responding to Elfbait talking about being subjective, mentions that that's a good point. To some, immersion can be just locking into the game, being in the right frame of mind. To some, it's going to be tracking encumbrance on their character sheet. And then Elfbait says, some of my best childhood sessions were on the living room floor, no table, no chair, maybe a couch. Some of my favorite sessions were at a small lakeside cabin. My buddies and I would grab a bag of groceries and our game stuff and turn out the world for a weekend. Yeah, I think that maybe if I was going to bottom line, if I had to elevator pitch someone what immersion was, I would say that you're in a space where the world outside the fictional world of the game is just tuned out, turned off. You don't know. Like I think of back playing in college. You go, you come to the place. It's maybe 11 o'clock, get started, and before you know it, it's 5 or 6 o'clock. You've just been playing, and you don't even think about it. All of a sudden, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm starving. We should figure out something to do for dinner." That to me is I would look if I had the ability to. I never did this, but if I had the ability to analyze that, I would have said, yeah, we were really immersed for that 4, 5, 6 hours, because other than and the thing is too, it's not like we were just playing the game nonstop. I mean, you're getting up to get a drink, you got to use the bathroom, you're doing all stuff, but you don't even remember those things. You just remember just being in it, and all those little breaks, all the little things you do, maybe mechanically. You just don't even. You're so much in the flow and that mix. I kind of don't like the way they use the word flow, but I don't know a better really word for it. You're so much in this moment that even when things outside the game, or when you have to deal with meta matters in the game, you kind of at the end of the day, you don't even remember them. You just remember that playing. You're just in it, and it's a hard thing now because it's a lot difficult. It's a lot more difficult to achieve when you're at your computer, because going back to Elfbait's story, you're at the cabin with some friends, some groceries. Maybe depending on when this was, didn't have cell phones, or cell phones weren't as much a part of our lives as they were now, or you guys all turn them off, or you do this stuff where you just have them in a corner. They're all charging somewhere else. They're charging in the kitchen. You're playing in the living room. You're just playing. But now if I'm playing on my computer, if I don't take lots of steps, the distractions are going to happen. I'm going to get little things pop up. Boo-boo, so send me a message. Boo-boo, I got an email. Boo-boo, 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 whatever's happening, right? And then it's much more easy to get pulled out of that flow. And maybe that's where you get the folks who are into all the tools, all the spectacle, because if you have all that stuff, maybe it's easier to ignore all the little alert boxes. Whereas I'm playing on Discord, and so I'm either looking at just the chat window, or if I'm looking at that and I don't have a lot of stuff to distract me in a good way in the game, then maybe those messages I'm more likely to see them. Whereas if I was immersed in some kind of VR experience, then it's more about the spectacle helps keep the real world at bay. Maybe does that make sense? Because I think a lot of the things that would lead to more immersion in terms of when we start looking into what can we do to try to get there, I do think it's difficult. There is a remove when you're playing digitally. I don't think that the things that work really well when you're in person or whatever they are, I think you take those same tools and deploy them in a virtual game. I just don't think they're as strong. I think there is something about the separation between us. Something about the separation between us that makes that really difficult. And I think that's why there's a lot of struggles with our pre or post or during and post COVID games that has put a real strain on that immersion. I'm just going to take a moment because I do want to write down that immersion versus spectacle. But I do think it's important. And I'll like another note, which we can start to do is, what can we do? And I don't want to, and I think as I forget who said it, might have been Daniel Lambert about responsibility, because it's one of those things, and I've talked about it multiple times. I think usually the one I come up with is the one that irks me is the GM is responsible for fun, but I think that really comes to the same thing. We're a table as a group, and while the GM has more power in a sense with what they can do to create situations, to create a vibe, for example, I think it's something that everyone should take responsibility for. What can we do as a table to create immersion? Why are you giving me those bubble things? Those blue underlines, windows. A perfectly good sentence as far as I can tell. Drag that out. Let me go back to the chat really quick. Oh, Elfbase says late 80s, baby. Yeah. I mean, most things I would say we were much better off in all times now than we were, say, back in the 80s, just in terms of technology and things. But maybe we're just at this point where we haven't figured out how to make up for what you lose. Because I think we all know. I don't think anyone argues that playing or that doing things kind of in physically together. And I'm not even talking about intimacy things. I'm just thinking about hanging out as a group together in one space physically. I don't think anyone would argue that you can get to that same point if it's a virtual hangout, right? No one I think would suggest, or I haven't heard anyone make the argument that no, man, these virtual hangouts are better than hanging out in person. I don't think anyone would say that. So we know that we're already, and I'm assuming here a lot of our games are just virtual or digital now. And even if they are not, I think one of the things that maybe is more problematic than we want to think, than we want to appreciate, or that we can appreciate right now, is not only, even if we're not playing digitally, we're using so many digital tools, so many things that bring that digital space to us. That Elfbait, in the late 80s, the late 80s, or maybe early 90s when I'm in kind of college and playing D&D. Didn't have a cell phone, so we didn't have anything even to have next to us to check. So we went to somebody's house. We were there. There was nothing else. We didn't have a choice to really have much to distract us unless somebody had a TV on in the background, which they didn't because everyone was playing the game, kind of thing. Whereas now, I think that's a big issue is the devices. But when the game has incorporated the devices to the fact that not only do I have this device, but I need the device because that's where my character sheet is, that's where my other things, then sure, it's got all the information for me, but it's also opening the door to those distractions, because now I've got my phone and my character sheet's on my phone, and then look at my character sheet. Well, I start getting those little alerts again, and boo, 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 boo. And for me, before I know it, I'm going down some kind of rabbit hole of looking at stuff. So it's complicated. There's a lot going on. Elfbait says, I have a player in my virtual game who insists on using a paper sheet and real dice just for the real experience. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's a superior experience, but but I think it is nice. I think it is nice, and I think it demonstrates, not demonstrates. There's yeah, there's something to it. I think it's I definitely think it's nice. But I've used many digital sheets. But I think I always do think that there's something special of having this, the physical, like it's a piece of paper, something in your hand. You can feel it. You've got the pencil. You can see your old marks as you're erasing in there. You're writing things down. I do think that stuff, I think there is some connection between writing or doing these physical things and then it registering in your brain than when either it's just dragged and dropped from, I as the GM, you got this new item, so I just dragged and dropped it from D&D Beyond, basically into your character sheet, whatever, done. I mean, that's great, and it's cool and it's awesome, but when you're writing it down and you're looking at it and you've told the GM, oh, can I see the book so I can write it down on my sheet, and I'm writing it down, I just think there's a different feel to it. It just feels maybe more intense. Maybe that's part of the immersion. You're doing these things that it just feels more concrete, more immediate because you really are interfacing with it directly as opposed to clicking buttons on a mouse. Now, it's not like we're actually going from, playing like a LARP and then doing it. But I think all these things, I do think they make a difference, though. Maybe not a huge difference, but I think they make a difference. Elfie says, great point there on drag and drop. My players in my online game are constantly forgetting about magic items they've acquired in play. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that, right? So we could probably, so let's start getting into what we can do. Or let me maybe I should do that before we get into there. Let's look at some. Let me put that aside here. Can I duplicate this? Is there a duplicate? I think there is. Hold on a minute. Maybe duplicating it's easier. There is a duplicate. You are a master. All right, I'll put this here. Move this down here. So what are the barriers? So it's probably good to think about. Always a good idea when you're trying to come up with some solution. What are we solving for? So we have some idea of immersion, though it is murky and it's going to be subjective. And these things are very much like I don't know how I would measure being like the things I'm saying I want, or when I feel the most immersed, being focused, being present, being part of the flow. How do you measure those? I'm not sure, but I think it may be easier to say that probably at least the way to get there is to eliminate these things that are, what is stopping us? Eliminate the barriers to immersion. What are the things that are keeping us from being focused, being present, and being part of the flow? So we're looking at, barriers, and I think distractions is a big one. And whatever distractions those could be. Sometimes distractions could be someone else at the table. I think you've probably seen that where two people, maybe they're in a relationship, maybe they want to be in a relationship, maybe they're out of a relationship, but they can't really separate that stuff, or there are family members in the background, or there are phones ringing, or there's noise, or whatever. Those anything, the sensory distractions, I think, are at least going to make it harder to achieve that state of being immersed. Not that you can't get it, because I've seen people playing games, and I've played in a few games like at ShireCon, where I felt like I was immersed in those games, even though there's a lot of stuff going on. Like when I was playing in Bandits Keep, Daniel's game at ShireCon, you got in the flow, and all that noise just seemed to kind of fade away, and I was just craning my head to listen to what was going on and to see what was going on with the players. But certainly, I think to the extent that you don't have those things, whatever they may be, I think it helps get you closer. My cat is licking paper back here. Bruce, stop licking the paper. I have books on my bed, and my cat is sitting on my bed, and he's licking the paper. Railway says, remember, players, always lock your children in the back room when the game begins, and the dog or the cat. Yeah, for sure. Actually, it was funny back in the day. It's crazy to think these kids are adults now. But I remember one of the guys used to have his kids over, and they would be like the beer runners. They would be almost like set up like you see the kids who are the ball boys and girls at a tennis match, where they're kind of crouched by the net, they're sort of crouched down, and then it was like, all right, get another beer, and the kid would pop, 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 pop. That was kind of their fun thing. That was their fun way. There's a certain age where your kids, you can get your kids to kind of do stuff because they don't appreciate that it's a chore and they think it's like a fun thing. You got to use that moment when they have. Bridget Rourke says we taught a macaw to roll D20s. That would be a good one. And this is watered down iced tea for the working man. I would love to have some animal that if I could train my cat to roll dice, I definitely would. Yeah, distractions. I mean, it might be worth breaking down what kind of distractions they are, but I feel like distractions is, I mean, on the one hand, it feels like a huge topic because I think there are many distractions. So what I've been talking about just now, before we start talking about teaching your pets to roll dice, are kind of your sensory distractions. But I also think that there you can have meta distractions. You know, you this is kind of the thing that this is one of those things that in the OSR, right? It's told to us over and over again in different materials, essentially, how hey, this stuff's kind of loosey goosey to begin with, and the GM's going to do their own thing, kind of, and you just got to roll with it. And we don't have a lot of rules, so we're just going to say things in the moment. We're going to go with it. We're not going to spend time trying to suss it all out. We're not going to get worried about rules as written versus rules as intended, and all this stuff. We're gonna go, which I think some people like myself like a lot, provided that and I don't want to get down rabbit holes of GM fairness and all this stuff, but provided you have someone who's a good arbiter, a fair referee, things can just move swimmingly along. But you can also see, and I've certainly seen, not only in say 5th edition, but in old school games and older school games, when people just get caught up in the meta kind of stuff. The I don't think this is right. Like, you're in a monster and you think, oh, this is a troll. We're going to do troll. Now we can use our anti-troll tactics, and then it's not acting like a troll. And instead of running with that in the moment and being kind of that present and part of it, you pull yourself out because you start saying, hey, wait a minute, GM, I've looked in the monster manual, or I'm going to look in my monster manual, and you're not running this troll by the book. You're being unfair. All this kind of meta stuff. That kind of stuff where you start getting caught up in the whoa, GM, rules is written. I should have gotten this. And you gave me that. And for whatever reason, because I feel strongly about it, because look, it could be important in the moment if it's a life or death or between failure and success of some kind of goal, that my character should have gotten to do A, B, or C, and you didn't. You gave them A, but not B or C, and now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find that rule, or I'm gonna look up and do this work. Great, but I think that's certainly something that if I'm maybe that player doesn't feel like it, but I'm sure if I was another player at that table, when I've been someone just kind of observing this on the side, yeah, that's pulling me out of the game. Now we're stuck looking up rules if the GM doesn't kind of, and it's hard. I think as a GM, I think people paint it as it's very easy to wrangle the players back on that, to get them off the brink of looking up the rule, but it's difficult. And even if you do, that 30 seconds or a minute where they're running to their books or they're scrolling through the SRD on something like D&D Beyond, oops, hit my mic, scrolling around through the SRD and D&D Beyond, or otherwise looking up that rule, even if you're able to say, okay, we're going to talk about this later, la, 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 there's still that point where you've kind of, okay, the game, we've slowed down, we've kind of put the brakes on a little bit. Now I got to maybe reset things a little bit. Now, maybe this player's agitated and they're going to take a little bit of time to get back in the flow, so on and so forth. So I think that's definitely I would call it a category of barrier, is that kind of meta distractions, and people don't mean it. I think that's the thing too. Like with lots of behaviors that we have, it's not that people are meaning to do wrong. When I get an argument with my wife, neither one of us is really trying to get in an argument, but it happens. We hit each other's sore spots, or we do just behaviors that we have, and then it's only after the fact that we look at and say, oh, why did I go and do that? I should have known that would have done this. As someone who might get distracted, and this can happen as a GM too, as the player says, oh, I use this ability to this and that. One GM may say, sure, great, and make a note, I'm going to look this up later because I think it's a little bit overpowered. And some other GMs are going to go, hold on, let me check my books because I want to get this right or whatnot. And I've certainly done that myself. I'm sure everybody's done that at one time or another. But when you do put that kind of hold on it, when you sort of start to get wrapped up in the meta, that pulls you out of to me, the important part, which is the fictional element, not the meta element. Because at the end of the day, who cares about what the meta stuff? That's not what we remember. We remember how the stuff evolved in the fiction. Like, yeah, I rolled a critical hit, but the thing that makes it memorable isn't the fact that I rolled a 20, it's what happens in the fiction because of that roll. I sliced the head off of the Giant King. That's kind of the cool moment, not the, oh, I rolled a 20 and killed a mob. Like, okay, I guess. Stochastic agency. This mug is my PAX Unplugged. PAX Unplugged mug. There's a, I don't want to get too distracted, but why not? There's a vendor. Here, I'll just shout him out. Wild Bill. What does it say? Wild Bill's Craft Beverages that seem to be at the PAX. They may go to other conventions as well. And they have this kind of their thing basically is they sell these big mugs. I think they're all metal, but you can get all kinds of different designs. I just got the very simplest, and I think they're all basically stamped. So at PAX East, I think you get one. It would be stamped PAX East. You get the mug, and they also have homemade sodas. So you buy the mug, you get a free filled with soda, and then you get a very cheap refill on the soda. So everybody, or not everybody, lots of people have them, and then they just use them to get refills. The soda's a bit too sweet for me. I probably should do like half soda and half water when I'm there, but it's a fun thing, and I thought, why not? So cheers. Let's see, what else do we have here? Ian says, when rules break the logical consistency of the world, you can't actually set anything on fire with produced flame. And then Stochastic agency says complexity is a distraction. I think if everybody can deal with the complexity, I think there's different kinds of complexity, right? There's rules complexity and maybe there's fictional complexity. I think complex situations in the fiction, I think that can actually be immersive. I think, because the more you get people thinking about the world and just how they're doing things in the world and how things have consequences in the world, but this or that, I love that stuff. I love when if I hear the party just sitting bang on, yeah, but if when we do this, then the Duke's going to be mad at us. But then if we don't do this, and this is going to happen, all these things, and it's a complex situation, a lot of moving parts, but they're all fictional moving parts. I do think when you get a bunch of complexity in the mechanics, you have to be careful. Sometimes the complexity can mirror of the mechanics can mirror what you're doing in the game, so it kind of fits like a jigsaw thing. Like even though we're doing something maybe in multiple steps with everything, but if it, I don't know, there's a weird thing all the time with the board games too, where sometimes the mechanics just kind of seem to fit with the fiction, where you feel like the mechanics are thematic, even though in no real way are they thematic. I'm trying to think of what a good example would be. Let's say in a board game, something like let's say I think Wingspan. I think Wingspan is a pretty thematic game. Some of it has to do with the art. The birds are wonderful, but even though you're doing things, of course, have really nothing to do with birds. You're playing cards in certain orders and then doing certain things with them. Something about the way it all fits together. You kind of feel like in some way in your brain, you kind of feel in this mode where even though things get complicated, it kind of makes kind of a sense in this sort of fiction of running, I don't know, a bird sanctuary or whatever we're doing. Kind of like, ooh, it sort of matches up. Where I always felt what Terraforming Mars kind of had that. Even though we're not doing anything like actually terraforming a planet, okay, but it's got this thing. So I think sometimes the mechanics complexity can work, but I think other times you just end up with complexity that's just, it's kind of just there, or it's complexity because I feel like a 5th edition has a lot of this complexity where it's not necessarily intended to be complex, but just because there are ramifications, like, I use my free action, then my reaction, like it's complicated, maybe is a better word, like complicated instead of complex. Like I think something that's complex can actually add if it's outside the fiction, but it kind of matches the fiction in some way. When it's just complicated, then I think you more run into issues. I'll put let's see. I'll put that there. Maybe I'll put a question mark. Question mark. It says PAX Unmugged. Yeah, pretty much. Okay, the agency mentioned Zombicide. Yeah, that's right. That's a good one. Or something like Dead of Winter. You're trying to be you're the goal is you're collecting supplies, trying to avoid the zombie apocalypse, and there's all kinds of little bits to do with that, but it sort of feels thematic because the steps you're doing and the mechanical process kind of mirror the steps you'd be doing thematically in a fictional process. So when you have to have somebody who's back at the base camp cleaning up the trash, even though it's just doing it, kind of makes sense because you think about it in your brain, like, yeah, somebody, what is happening out in base camp? We do need someone to clean up the trash because that would happen. So you have this trash action, and even though the trash action doesn't resemble at all picking up trash, it kind of makes sense. Whereas other things are just kind of complicated, and then you get pulled out of it because you can no longer separate, right? Because I was thinking about this. One of the things I was thinking about a lot is a lot of times I think about flow. I think about how does rolling dice and that stuff fit in flow. And I was thinking, do I come out of the flow if I'm playing a game and the GM asks me to roll a d20? Like if I was playing a game and I'm trying to do something stealthy, and the GM says, "Okay, give me a stealth check, give me a whatever." Yeah, I guess that what is it? Fifth stealth check, move silently, whatever. Give me whatever kind of stealth check. Great, I roll. Ooh, got a good number. Oh, got a bad number. Whichever way it goes. Does that fact of having to turn to my character sheet and look it up and roll the dice bring me out of the flow? And I think the answer is no, it doesn't. But I think in some other times, well, one, I know when I take that action that there's a roll attached to it. Like I'm aware. I know I'm going to try to move silently. There's a check wrong with that. I know that, and it all seems to resolve. Maybe it's on that area of, okay, it's just kind of thematic to what I'm doing. But I imagine other cases, which is why I've always wondered, as much as I would love to play, say, Burning Wheel or even Pendragon, which is kind of on my bucket list of games to play. The way it gets very kind of accounting heavy with just steps and all this stuff, like, would that take me out of the flow? Like, I do think there's some line where having to excessively, and I guess excessively going to be another very subjective phrase. What's excessive to me is not excessive to you, but there's probably a certain point where the mechanics start to push into the fiction or push into that immersion, but maybe not, because people will have talked about Burning Wheel being the most kind of immersive experience they've had, even though you do something like in a negotiation in Burning Wheel and it's all kinds of rolls and tests and this or that. Whereas in my game, so I had a game, I'll probably do a recap at some point, but I had a game last Friday and there were no dice rolled. The entire session, we rolled no dice. The party was in a situation visiting someone they kind of knew before, and it was all about them playing with the environment and then doing social interactions for about 2.5 or 3 hours. And there were no dice rolled the entire game. Never once did I ask them to roll, they never asked me kind of engage something need to roll. It was all about them just kind of playing in the situation. And that to me kind of hits kind of my ideal. But then again, I haven't played Burning Wheel and I really want to, and I really want to play Pendragon. And people have had such amazing experiences with those games that I have to imagine that it's probably more along that complicatedness. Like maybe in those situations when you play it, the roles seem more in tune with what you're doing thematically so that they don't pull you out of immersion. Let's see, we got some stuff in the chat. Let me scroll over and see what's going on. See, Brian Smith says the roll of D20 line from a DM feels like a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter, like a little moment of held breath tension before seeing what happens next. That's a good point. And I think Brian Smith, that's a good point on multiple levels. When you do the roll 20s, when you ask someone to roll and it is clearly meaningful, then you get that little moment. If it becomes excessive, every 10 feet you're rolling or something else you're rolling, then you lose that value. And a lot of guidance does say, hey, only roll when you really mean it, when it really is meaningful. But this kind of underscores it. When you roll when it's meaningful, it's an additive thing. Yeah, there is this bit of tension of, oh, and then you roll the dice. And did I roll high? Did I roll low? Do I have advantage? Do I have disadvantage? Like whatever's going on. But now if I'm rolling it all the time and I'm rolling on stuff that clearly seems to not be important, then it's going to start to lose that. Now, there are some times when the player might not understand what's important, the GM does. So of course, there's going to be exceptions to this, but it is something to keep in mind. If you're asking your table to constantly roll dice, that kind of tension that comes with this is going to be lost because you're just doing it too much. You can't care that much, and plus, the more dice you're rolling, the more your chances you're going to fail. And if it feels like you're just being set up to fail over and over again, you're just going to kind of resign yourself to, I'm going to fail. So why am I gonna get too wrapped up in this? But yes, if it's in a time where nothing's been going on, suddenly roll a d20. Now it's, something's happening. Elfay says immersion has to exist in the context of the understanding that we are still playing a game. Yep. I think most people do. I think there's some discourse that is more, I don't want to insult anybody, but I think that there is a lot of discourse that's kind of internet centered. I really don't think that a lot of folks outside the internet, and obviously almost everyone's on the internet now, but I mean the kind of internet game community, that the people care about a lot and will talk about a lot, that I don't think really come up that much. And I don't think that people get wrapped up in the, I don't know, performance versus game in the real world. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But it's never been no time I've been playing did anyone ever get into some kind of discussion, let alone anything more heated like an argument over whether we were playing a game. Like, it was understood all the time. We are playing a game. We are doing some kind of I don't even know what I would call it. Some kind of performance. I don't know. But it is a good thing to keep in mind. Yes, context is important, but it's just kind of funny because I think you go to Reddit and you read the kind of stuff being talked about, and then you maybe go talk to people at the local gaming store, and I feel like they're not the same. Even sometimes when I would talk to people who would read Reddit or kind of be in some of these communities, see them out in the public, they did not. It was hard to find people who were actually even had points of view on the stuff that the community gets all wrapped around in. Ryan Smith says, I think it's pretty underrated to have agreed upon paths in and out of the story, like a timeout to get meta, or when the last time we left our heroes narrative shifting phrase. Yeah, I think that is probably underrated, though. It's something that I think I remember encountering a fair amount of, having that kind of, okay, where do we leave off? And folks saying, and I do that in my game, I'll ask the players, okay, where did we leave off? And they'll kind of start to parse through it and remember. I think that one of the things, though, is it's not due to one thing or another, but there's I'm gonna put this in here because I think it is something. There's just and this I'm gonna say, let me put this here, less shared responsibilities. And I mentioned this in the video the other day. I think that's something that comes up a lot, especially players, but GMs too, to a certain degree. And especially when you put them both together and how they relate with each other, there's just less responsibilities. And I think that maybe the things that folks don't like the tracking of resources and things like that, doing it on paper, all these things that we have all these tools to either do away with them, or we have mechanics now that do away with them. But I think that maybe, and maybe there's a realization here that some of that stuff, even though it seems like it's not fun and it seems the antithesis of fun, actually was added to the experience. I think that it's so much more engaging when you have people who are taking notes, people who are drawing maps, people who are writing stuff down and tracking. So I really do think that all those things just put us in the moment. They bring us to be present in the game. I know I've been sitting there, and I usually like to play a lot of rangery types. I always like those guys jumping from cover to cover, launching arrows, all that stuff. And I'm doing my due, and I'm writing, I'm scratching off the arrows, or I'm making little hash marks and slashing them off. And when I start to notice that I'm low on arrows, and now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, does anyone have more arrows? Or we got to end this fight quick, I'm running out. Or what am I going to do? To me, it gets me in that moment of the archer looking at their, looking into their quiver or whatever, and not seeing many arrows left, and realizing I'm down to 3 arrows. I'm down to 3 arrows, guys. And now we got to change tactics, or we got to do whatever. Or like I said before, writing down an item that you got, or poring over someone's hand-drawn map that you've made and trying to think about as you've tried to backtrack through the map, and now you realize you've gone wrong, trying to figure out where you went wrong on the map. What was this, something you just erased or whatever? Like, all that stuff, I think, just brings you in a way that, sure, we can bring in dynamic lighting, and sure, I can give you a pretty map on Roll20, but I don't think, because you had no investment, maybe that's a better word, no investment in it, then it doesn't sink in. Because I do think there's something to how you interact with something and how it just getting your brain involved. And the less we have to interact with stuff, and maybe the way we do, I don't think that the way we digitally interact with things like keyboard and mouse is as immersive as just physically going through these steps. maybe there's something to that. I kind of think there is. I don't have any studies to back it up. It's totally just my own thought, but I do think there is something to that. And of course, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that I can't play a game. I can't run a game like that. I just don't have the space, don't have the time, schedule, whatever, to run a physical game. But I certainly would if I could. I think, like a lot of folks, we just have to do the best with the tools we have and deal with some, if that's a barrier, deal with it as a barrier, deal with distractions as a barrier. Elpit says, one example of something that works against my immersion is secret squirrel stuff at the table. I have a standard rule at my table that character sheets are secret to characters only. Interesting. Secret squirrel. I've never heard, I don't think I've heard that term like that. Secret squirrel. Yeah, I don't know if I ever had problems with players sharing, but I have a funny story from my college game. So I joined this college game. I was a freshman, and the other players were, sophomores, juniors, seniors. It was an established game before I got there. I didn't because I left the school. I didn't end up. I only maybe play with them for a couple of semesters, but it was a lot of fun. Anyway, when I first started to play this game, I forget how I got in touch with them, but I was like, yeah, I'm interested and I'd like to play. Okay, make your character. The GM said to me, he said, hey man, listen, I just know my players and they're a little bit kind of backseat drivery. They can, in other words, they can be kind of a, what's the word? There's a word for it in board gaming. I forget the word for it, but basically they might try to tell you what to do. So be careful what you tell them about your character, because they know all your abilities. They might start to kind of strongly suggest what you do all the time. Right. Okay. So I said, okay. So of course, me being me, I kind of took it to an extreme. So my character shows up and they're asking me like, so what's your name? And I say, yeah, I'm John of the Woods, which wasn't actually my name. They're like, okay, well, what do you do, John of the Woods? Oh, I think I was playing. I think this character was playing. I was playing as was a. I think they were a magic user thief. Like I'm a. I move around. I'm kind of sneaky. I got some stuff. So like, okay, so they thought had me kind of nailed down as a thief. I was like, yeah, I kind of do stuff, but I was very cagey. But I was part. I had magic use. So I started using magic missile in combat, and they would say like, hey, whoa, where'd that come from? Hey man, like you a magic user? And I say, no, these are just my blades. I fling my blades, and that's my magic missile. And I just kind of kept them guessing, and I would never, and it drove them a little bit batty. I think that I would never just cop to the fact that I was and give them my entire layout. I'm a magic user thief 3 with this, and that, and the other. I just wouldn't do it. And it was just kind of funny. I don't know that I would say that added or detracted from the immersion of the experience. I think some folks like to, or they're nosy, want to know everything, and other folks are fine not to. But it was kind of funny that I spent that campaign. Something happened. I think we all ended up. Yeah, that was the one where we all got trapped in a room and basically killed. But yeah, it was kind of a TPK. Actually, no, it was a almost TPK. My character actually ended up alive, but basically trapped. So it was like an immediate TPK for everyone else, and it would have been a slow TPK for me as I was hiding somewhere, but I couldn't really come out and I couldn't leave. So it was basically, I was just going to die more slowly than the rest. Ryan Smith says, internet squeaky wheels are expert strawman builders. Yes, they say. Yes, indeed they are. And Elfbase says they absolutely do. This is his secret squirrel rule. Says they had to ask a player to leave a game because they couldn't separate character versus character from PvP. He also had a tendency to take anything said at the table by other players as in character. Yeah, that one's a tough one because and I'll put this here. I'll just add this here, right? We want to a barrier is mismatched expectations because there are tables that play with. Play with the concept of things like character versus character, right? That's a thing. I played in a long time game that had PvP, and in fact, it was funny. We didn't actually engage in much of it, but it was definitely on the table. It wasn't a fantasy game; it was a sci-fi game, but there was PvP, which I did engage with a couple of times, but it didn't end up being as much as I thought. But something happened, and they were all down with it. But the GM, who's a really good friend of mine, was super upfront when I was talking about joining the game about, hey, this is a part of it. People may gank you, and that's just it. Don't take it personal. It's just business. However, I don't usually like that in my D&D games and things as normal. I kind of like that the folks are all kind of heroes. Maybe they're all complicated heroes. Maybe they're Han Solo-y sort of heroes, but that they're not trying to all gank, steal from each other all the time. And there's definitely some tables play with that, like everything you say, which can be helpful. But as a player, you have to know the table you're joining and what they want. Obviously, this person had these ideas of what the game was like, and your game wasn't like that. And yeah, so that's a terrible fit. But certainly having someone there whose expectations of play and everything, style, don't mesh with the other ones is going to definitely detract from everybody's immersion, because there's always going to be that one piece. You're trying to put together this kind of wheel and have all the gears and everything turn, and one piece is just being clunky. That it's kind of like we want to remove all the dust and all the things that might trip up our delicate set of gears, and then this thing is just a cog that doesn't fit the machine. Let's see what else we got here. Brian Smith says, having your fellow player say something like, running low on arrows, let's finish quick, will feel pretty cool to the player not tracking arrows. Would it feel pretty cool? And then I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things. Okay, so for not as say a large majority, for a lot of folks, what they're going to see and things that they watch are going to be what they want to do. So when I made the video yesterday about everyone watching the end of the House of Dragons season, I was kind of anticipating what I think people are going to look at and then want to get onto. I think if we get more grittier media in which these things, maybe kind of survivability and these kind of things matter, then maybe people will start to see it's kind of cool. Maybe it'll never be the majority of people. Maybe it'll never be the same as when you can just be kind of heroic and just have basically endless arrows popping out of your quiver and you can just do it. But I would maintain that when you pull the last arrow out of your quiver, and then you spend a turn to aim and everything, and then you nail it, and you crit, and because you took a turn to aim, it does whatever extra damage, all the stuff, and you take down the beast. That is so much more meaningful and impactful and just a moment than if it was just one more in the endless line of arrows. But it may be that it's just no one's ever going to go back to that. I don't know. But I'm with you, Elfbait. I like the tracking, and I don't find it that big a deal. And I didn't find it that big a deal back in the day. But it's kind of one of those things that I think, like Thaco. Okay, it's fun to make fun of Thaco, and I didn't get some grognard types got all bent out of shape because Wizards of the Coast made some joke about Thaco the clown. Who cares? Stupid people. People have been complaining about Thaco since Thaco was actually a thing. So it's not like the criticisms towards Thaco are like some kind of new phenomenon. They were happening. They've been happening forever. However, I will say that I think it gets a bad rap. Yeah, subtraction is a little bit tougher and not quite as easy as addition. So addition makes more sense. I get it. It's not like Thaco was hard. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't this horrible thing. But you would hear it now, and the way you would hear people talk about it, it was like nobody could have ever played this game with Thaco. It's like, no, people played all the time with Thaco. It was totally fine, and you would get over it in about 10 seconds if there weren't other alternatives. And I think the same thing with tracking. People talk about tracking like it's this horrible thing, but I think a lot of people who act like it's so terrible never actually had to do it. And I think if they just tried to do it and they just sat down and didn't do it begrudgingly, but just said, you know what, I'm just going to honestly track all this stuff, maybe on a physical piece of paper and during a game and see how it goes. And then you'll see that it's not that big a deal. You got 50 rations, and as you're using them, you do a cross off a line. You get to 5, you just put a line through it, and you don't really have to worry about it until you've counted up to 49. Then it's like, oh gosh, I got 1 ration left. Like, it's not a big deal. Kind of like it's not a big deal unless you make it a big deal. Let's see, just reading through some more of the chat things. So Brian, so Casting Agency said that they had a table with the opposite effect. Tracking stuff takes people out of immersion. That's interesting. I'd really be. I mean, I'm not going to say it didn't happen because obviously it happened to your table. I'd be curious about that because that. I guess it's. I guess that part of it is that style, right? Because one of the things is I'm gonna my guess, not knowing anything, haven't seen what Stochastic Agency has said. If they've said more about it in the chat, is my impulse is to say that if you are playing, if you are what you were trying to play is as say Legolas from the Lord of the Rings movies, in which they have the endless supply of arrows and never have to worry about having a last arrow. I don't think does he ever at any point looks and says, "Oh my gosh, I got one arrow left, and I have to make an awesome shot." I don't think so. That's just not the nature of that movie and that kind of style. If that's your style, then the things that remind you that you're not playing Legolas are going to detract from that, and they're going to, and that would make a barrier. So I can see it like that. For someone like me, having endless arrows, which is such a kind of TV movie kind of thing that doesn't really make sense. And I know makes sense. We're playing in a magical world with magical things. I know, but my version of things that you actually have physical numbers of things to count. Anyway, not tracking it, I think for me is a little bit like feels kind of video gamey. It feels like, oh, well, I've just got endless ammo. That's not as fun because I like the strategy of okay, we're coming in this encounter. I have 10 arrows. I think there's going to be more stuff to fight later on before I'm going to get more arrows. So I'm going to adjust my fighting tactics and strategy to make sure that I have arrows for the other, however other more fights I'm going to fight. So I might get into hand to hand. I might use my throwing axe. I might try to figure out some other way I can help to preserve my arrows for when I need it. That to me brings me into the game. Someone else, they might not. That might not be what they think about when they're playing the game. Oh, let's see. Brian Smith says this character sounds an awful lot like an importer / exporter named Art Vandelay. Yes. Yes. Hey, Gashrin. Oval Patrol says it's definitely a bit. Oh, wait. Oh, wait a minute. Now I'm way far behind in the comments. I was starting to read things I already read before. Hold on a minute. Now I gotta. Let me see where I am here. Oh, Sarcastic Age says it was the idea of fiddling too much with the character sheet. I get you. I think that's I don't. Now, is this an online? I'm curious, Stochastic Agency. Was this an online game or an in-person game? Did they feel like they were doing all this fiddling through like Roll20 or whatever, or they feel like they had a physical sheet? Because I think it's one of those things when you're at the table physically. I don't think it's a big deal, but I can see when you've got I got my chat screen here, and then I got to enter into other windows and do other stuff. It just ends up being a distraction because I'm interfacing with stuff kind of away from the moment. Whereas if I just have my head down for a minute and the table's going on, I don't feel so removed. I thought the common argument against tracking was just that people don't like it, as opposed to it being too fiddly. Because I don't think it is really fiddly. But I think that's one of the things in which the modern tools have not made it. Their interfaces are fiddly. Because I think on a character sheet, I go down a list, 10 arrows, spent 9 arrows. Like that to me, I don't know. I don't think of that as being fiddly. But if I'm on something like, and again, I don't use these tools, so I don't know how they work. But if I got to go Roll20 character sheet and I got to find menus and then that becomes to me more fiddly. Just having a pencil with an eraser, erasing 10 and putting 9 to me is almost the antithesis of fiddly. But that's me. It's an in-person game. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, Stochastic Agency. But hey, everyone, there's always going to be exceptions to every rule. For every person who may, or every 10 people that may say something helps me, you're going to find at least another person that says that works against me. So I guess it's just the way it is. Ryan Smith says, I think maybe setting up tiers of immersion might be easier for players to find their place. Feels like session 0 would be important to find out everybody's preferred level of immersion. Well, I don't know if there's tiers or just different what people like. And I think that's part of that is, getting into kind of what can we do, right? Is we can, first thing is know yourself. I was gonna say know thyself to be clever. Know yourself. Like what style you like, how you like to play, what type of game you want to play. this is going to be the big thing. If I'm playing a game that's not really to my taste, and I think we do this a lot, particularly online and in person too, depending on where you live. And I say depending on where you live because we don't always have access to a bunch of games. Some folks, they only have access to online games. Some folks, they only have access to a couple of games in their local town, what run out of the gaming store, and then what they can find online. There's a tendency to just kind of take what you can get. I want to play something, so I'm going to play something. Even though when I read through it, it's not exactly what I want to play. And when you do that, I think you're making it more difficult yourself to find that immersion experience because you're setting yourself up for that mismatched expectations. You're probably not going to be invested. You're probably not going to want to take on those responsibilities or even interface with them. Like, does someone want to be a map maker? Does someone want to take notes? And you're going to be like, no, don't really want to because I kind of don't care that much. I just want to kill stuff. And this is the thing I could find to do that. All these things, you're going to be more likely to be distracted by stuff because you're just not into it this much. So I think to the extent that you can know what you're looking for, and sometimes, the thing is with session 0, and I would never recommend I would never say don't do it. And I think this is why I always say do rolling ones, is because you may think you know what you want until you start playing it. And then it's like, yeah, this is not what I actually want. Either the people, the story, the way they're running the game. Like there's a lot of stuff that can run afoul because session 0 is going to kind of give you almost if you have one, it's going to be kind of the best case scenario. Like if everything runs the way I want it to, if everybody plays the way I want to, this is the kind of game we're going to play. And then you actually start to play, and then you get the realities of, okay, this is because the game is going to fall short of session 0 somewhere. I guarantee it. It's just, I guess I would say, especially with if you're doing a group and people don't really know each other, if you're coming into an established table, I think you're probably more likely to get a session 0 that's going to stick in terms of meeting all those expectations. I think for some kind of rando online game, it's just going to be tough because you get players in there, they don't know what they want. They think they want something, they don't. Maybe they just want to play. They didn't read the thing. They didn't listen. All these things. It's going to fall short somewhere. So that's kind of why it's always a good idea to have kind of rolling session 0s. But then the kind of the best defense for this stuff is know what you want. And then you can, 1, filter out all the stuff that's not what you want. And then 2, when you get into something, you can recognize pretty quickly that it's not going to be what you want. And then you can get out and then find the game that's for you. Because that maybe is you want to kind of boil all this stuff down is if you find the game that you want, you're going to be less likely to be distracted. You're going to be less likely to be concerned. You're going to let those complications of play roll off your back. You're going to want to you're going to want to get invested in the game and take on responsibilities. And then you're going to have styles and everything that match. Right? It says, take responsibility for your immersion needs. Yes. It says, are we all eating mutton doing voices by candlelight? Well, we could do that too. Elfbase says that Seth Sikorsky has a video where he shows 2 characters' interactions in the same scene. One has them waiting for the DM to feed them their fun, and the other is them inserting their own fun. Yeah, that stuff is going to be very much dependent on the style and everything. And I don't mean players inserting their own fun, but I've seen, and I'm sure I've been that player at times, inserting your own fun can be to the detriment because your fun isn't the fun the rest of the people have, right? Like when you're at that game and one guy decides to set fire to the town because they find that fun. They are inserting their own fun, but it's not constructive. Where you want kind of constructive fun, maybe that's a good thing, right? Insert your own constructive fun. Don't wait for others to serve your fun to you. I think that's good advice. We're talking about how to get into that flow, but you just got to be constructive. And and I talked about this in the other videos. I've talked about, right? This is where this playing for people, not just yourself. Okay, you may think it's funny to burn down the village. You got to know at minimum, not everybody at the table is going to find that funny. I think you know it. Maybe you're on junior high school and everyone will find that funny. Everyone will find it hilarious. Maybe one other person will. Chances are it just might be you. And if you think about it before you open your mouth and light your torch or go run and set the bonfires ablaze, stop and say, all right, this is fun to me. This is fun. But there are these other things I could do, which are also fun, that other people would find fun, that the GM might find fun, that we might collectively find fun. I could do that instead of this. maybe I should do that other thing. Maybe. Right. And the other thing with playing online with, especially with random people, is you just have less empathy for other people. You just don't care. Like, how many people join other games and quit, or join, like, you just, or just the way people just talk smack online just are awful and rude to each other, because they know that they're, 99.9999999% of the time are never going to see each other in a public place where they have to actually say something to someone's face. So you just do what you want. So it's difficult. But yeah, I definitely agree. Just take that moment to ponder if the fun thing you're doing, if your own fun matches up with the collective table fun. And if they don't match up, consistently don't match up, then you might be at the wrong table. Michael Riggs says, also makes ammo a treasure, helping battle Monty Hall system. Oh, that's a cool idea. I like that. So guys, the agent says that, but there's still that one player making Monty Python jokes during a somewhat serious Call of Cthulhu game. Yes. I mean, that's that, right? That's that mismatched expectation or style, right? Your fun isn't our fun, so you got to quit it. Brian Smith says, are there things that we can agree to not include for emergency sakes, do's and don'ts? I think, let's see. Well, we're running to the end. Well, we're already at the top of the hour, so I'll just make a header in here. I'm probably gonna have to do another video. Do more of this. Let's see. All right, what are some immersion don'ts? I'm gonna say don't act selfishly, right? You just said insert your own fun is a great thing, but it's got to be constructive. Don't act selfishly, constructively. Do what you can to minimize your distractions. You can turn off your phone. If someone said up there, hey, phones are turned off in the corner, turn off your phone. Very few of us. You always get these excuses like, well, but what if we're a doctor and we're on call? We need to be whatever. It's like, then you're a doctor and you're on call, and no one's going to ask you to turn off your emergency contact phone. But are you yourself a doctor? No. Well, then why are you making this argument? Turn off your phone. Turn the things off. You don't need it. No one's calling you. Turn it off. Turn it on silent. Put it on. Now I think my phone has things like focus modes and other things. Take your phone, put on whatever mode says that you're not going to be bothered unless it's your wife or your doctor or your kids' school calling you. Do that stuff, right? Don't let yourself be distracted. And I know that, look, I have ADD, okay? Everyone's got things. It's not going to be, do what you can, okay? I'm not saying that everyone's going to do everything, and some folks are going to have to live with doing it. And if having some kind of tool, spinner wheels, whatever it is that helps, then use your tools. I'm not saying that everyone has to do something cold turkey or whatnot. Do what is within you to do that you can do comfortably, and use the mechanisms and tools that you need to help, right? Smith says, don't undermine the group's immersion just because you don't care in one scene. Maybe agree to have a pause button to figure out if it's totally not what you expected. Yeah, or just wait. Just wait till the end of the session. I mean, if it's a thing like, I get what you're saying, Brian Smith. I think I think there are two ones, right? If it's you're in the scene and you don't care, but you're kind of in for the rest of it, then just suck it up. Okay, it's a scene, it's a moment. Like that's kind of that. Don't act selfishly. Oh, this is we're in this other person's backstory moment right now, and I'm not really interested. So what? Let it go. Right? Just let them have their moment, and you do that in support of them, so that when you have your moment, they're not going to be rolling their eyes and in the corner because you're doing something. Like maybe there's even something for you to do in that scene that you don't even think of. Now, if it's this is just the game, like, oh my gosh, this is all this game is. Like, I signed up to play D&D, but we're really doing some kind of, I don't know, Elizabethan romance simulator, and you get into it, you feel like, oh gosh, this is really what it is. Then maybe either at the next bathroom break or something, say like, hey, I just gotta bow out. If you're playing at in a convention, and just wait for a moment, don't just interrupt everybody, wait for a moment, say, hey man, you guys keep doing what you're doing, but I'm sorry, I'm just not for me, and leave. Or just wait to the end of the session, if you're playing at somebody's house or something, wait till the end of the session. Don't just like, quit out of Discord or Roll20 or whatever, drop a smoke bomb and just vanish into the night. Take a moment. Ryan Smith says, I try to throw an NPC to the disinterested player or ask them what the shopkeep smells like. Hey boy, what does that shopkeep smell like? I'd be a little bit disturbed if I was playing in a game, the GM asked me something like that. I'd be like, gross. I'm not smelling no shopkeeper. Disgusting. All right, folks. Well, I think we've got a good start. I knew when I put this up in the calendar for today, we weren't going to get super far into stuff. I think there's a lot. I think if I do another one of these, which it seems like I probably should, and let me know in the chat, let me know in the comments if this was fruitful. We feel like, yeah, there's something more to explore, because I'm happy to. We could probably get into some more detailed stuff. We can try to find, if you have some wisdom, video, audio, blog posts, Reddit posts, anything that you've seen, drop it in the chat, drop it in the comments, drop it to me on my forums, or drop it to me on Twitter or wherever. And we'll look at it, because I love to find some articles that folks have written and some people who have maybe studied this a little bit more to kind of dig into what we can do about immersion. But I thought we saw some good stuff. And I really think one of the important things we did, and we got out of the way, was just coming together in terms of defining what immersion is, because it's a very murky word. I think, as Elfbeat said, it's very subjective. I think we got a good start there. And I think we got a good start on the kind of things we should think about when we're looking at what is stopping our table from being immersed. And the other thing is, ask your party, ask your players. Some people may be immersed and we don't think they are. And some people we think are immersed, they're not. So if you're wondering, is my table immersed, or I feel like my table's not immersed the way I think they should be, reach out to them and ask them, because you may be surprised by the answers. The answers might not be as obvious as you think. Michael Riggs says, many younger players use their phones as their character character sheet, spellbook, etc. Yeah, I know. And I think that might be something that is actually a detriment, to be honest, Michael Riggs. That, yeah, we use them and they're great tools, but they create this opening for all those digital distractions to come floating into our lives. And I wonder if it wouldn't be better if we didn't, or that we could set up them to, like, oh, I'm going to be on this app that's got all my character stuff in there, and it kind of shuts out everything else. So I don't get Twitter notifications, I don't get Facebook, or set your phone to focus or private mode or whatever, so that you just don't get all that stuff. But I think for a lot of folks, already having their phone in hand makes it difficult to not flick over a window and see what's going on, or check a message, or do whatever. There's a lot of stuff to be had, and I don't think we're going to find any magic bullet solution, but maybe we can do some stuff to help us. And of course, if you also have some issues that have come up in this area and you think they'd be cool to talk through, let me know. I'm happy to bring somebody on from the community, bring you on video, audio. I have a way of leaving audio stuff. If you go to I think there's a link in the show description also to leave kind of an audio message. We can incorporate something like that, or have a discussion. If one of you feels like coming on and telling your immersion tales, either the ones that ended heroically or those that ended in tragedy, love to hear them. Until then, or until at least, I guess, tomorrow, I should be streaming tomorrow for a regularly scheduled Game Master community roundup. Have a great day or night whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.